Greg, today we have Crystal Shawanda
Yes, we do.
on the show. But before we get to that conversation, if we can just take a moment and bow down to our Lord and Savior, Neil Young. You haven't seen this? There's
Wow.
Neil Young. This is what I get for my birthdays. I get a Neil Young candle.
Wow. Isn't that sacrilege?
To who? Saint Neil? Like, I don't know. Not to me. It's fine.
All right.
Saint Neil.
All right.
Earlier this week, went to watch Harvest Time,
Yes.
which is the celebrating the 50th anniversary of the release of this album, Harvest by Neil Young, and phenomenal.
Good thing you explained what it was for all those that are listening
Yes.
on streaming services and not YouTube. But go ahead.
I showed the CD
Yes.
on camera, because you and I, we don't record anymore live, except when we do. So we're not together. So that's why I'm showing it to you at the camera.
Yeah, no.
But for any fans of, first of all, for any fans of Neil Young, this is a must-watch documentary. It contains, for those who've gone to Neil Young concerts, like, there are no 2-minute songs. He will take a song and he will just riff. They will just jam, and there's a lot of jamming in this documentary. Just phenomenal stuff, going back to when Neil was in his 20s. He calls himself a rich hippie, as he's sitting outside his ranch that he had at the time. And just an amazing movie. And even for those of you who aren't Neil Young fans, but just are appreciative of music in general, just a phenomenal documentary to watch. So it's I don't know, I'm sure for those who subscribe to his website, Neil Young Archives, it'll probably show up there, but it might also show up at various festivals throughout the year. So excited to have gone to see that. And related to that, Greg, is later this week, this is the week of December the 5th, a new movie premieres at Hot Dogs, Revival 69.
Yes.
And
we talked about this with previous guest.
Yes, Alan Cross. But I had an opportunity to see that movie last night, and it is phenomenal. It's like you're watching history, like literal music history. You're watching the breakup of the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
In a way that is not. It's not. Oh, damn! It's the breakup. There's no fighting involved. It's literally, John Lennon deciding I want to play live again. Because after a while, the Beatles stopped playing live and they just lived in the studio and just created some amazing albums, some amazing music. But John Lennon wanted to get back out live, and there was an opportunity. He didn't get paid for this show. Opportunity to play live in Toronto at some rock and roll revival show, and ends up going there and says, "Yeah, this is it. This is the end of the Beatles. This is what I want to do." Phenomenal movie. There's that. There's the introduction of Alice Cooper. It's just phenomenal footage and history in that. Probably more important than Woodstock. Not as popular because it wasn't in the States, but probably more important to me in the grand scheme of music than Woodstock.
I am looking forward to watching that before we sit down for our chat.
Yeah. And let's get on with our conversation. with Juno Award-winning singer-songwriter Crystal Shawanda.
Hi, the following podcast is brought to you by Radical Road Brewery, the best craft beer in the heart of Leslieville. Find them at 1177 Queen Street East. That's Radical Road Brewery.
Hey everyone, I'm Crystal Shawanda. I'm a singer-songwriter who sings the blues. I started out in country music and found my way to the blues. I live in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm from Wikwemikong First Nations, and welcome to the music.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Nailed it. Perfect. We're so excited to have you on, Crystal. I think, you know what, actually, we could probably do, though, is we could just, you and I, we'll get Karim to just leave, and then you and I will just talk about the Manitoulin Island for the entire hour. That works for you. And then, you know, he can come in and finish off at the end. I don't know if that's...
It really is a beautiful place.
It is. It is. My family, and I say this with all due respect, my family's been there. I guess my grandchild that was just born will now be our 6th generation out of Sandfield. So,
oh, that's awesome. Okay, Sandfield, awesome, very cool.
Yeah. So where I wanted to start off with is just like, can you talk about, you know, how somebody from Wiki, you know, became the musician that they celebrated, the award-winning musician that you are. And I don't want not the whole story, but just, you know, from your childhood and your enjoyment of music at that age.
Yeah, for sure. You know, I grew up in a family that just absolutely loved music. Everybody in my family, my parents, my brothers, and, you know, it was all genres, you know, no, but we didn't really stick with one genre. In my house, there was just good music and bad music. And so it was all styles, you know, and so I had a really great music education, and my family has really great taste. And even though they are not technically musicians, you know, they know when somebody's out of tune, they know when somebody's tone is not great. And so I had from blues to rock to country, you know, I heard it all and the best of it, you know, so, and also I noticed from a young age that my family, you know, for them, music was kind of like cheap therapy for them, you know, depending on the day that they were having, that's the song they would listen to. You know, if they're having a bad day, they would put on a certain song, a certain singer would change their mood around, and I would watch it happen. And I just thought it was the most amazing thing to see that, you know, that music could, you know, make somebody's day a lot better than it was before. And I like the idea of it. I watched my mom lean on Loretta Lynn records like it was a friend, you know, it was a shoulder to cry on. It was, and you know, my mom, she was a hardworking mother who stayed home with all 3 of us kids, and my dad was always working, and eventually he became a truck driver, so he was gone all the time. So, you know, essentially my mom was alone all the time. There's no time for friends when you're raising a family and trying to keep a household up. And so that's what and so watching my mom with Loretta Lynn, you know, I remember holding up a record and saying to my mom, I want to be like her. I want to be a singer. And my mom said, okay, you know, you can be anything you want to be. And I was fortunate to have 2 parents who were dreamers and really believed that anything was possible that you put your mind to. And then I grew up in a community, a very tight-knit, close community, you know, where everybody knows each other's business, whether you want them to or not. And you know, I also grew up around a lot of trauma, you know, like a lot of other First Nations communities. You know, I experienced a lot of suicide, depression, alcoholism, addiction, abuse, you know, not necessarily within my family, but within my extended family, which is my community. And you hear things, you know, when you're a kid, and I was one of those kids. I was always listening and paying attention and eavesdropping. And I could see that there was a lot of pain within my community. And I really just wanted to grow up to be a singer so that I could make people happy. And my first brush was when I was 6 years old. I sang at a Christmas concert. It was my first performance. And I sang a song called All I Want for Christmas Is My 2 Front Teeth, and my front teeth were missing. And I got to a funny part in the song, and everybody started laughing. And I remember I could actually feel their happiness. And I remember thinking, wow, this is all I have to do to make people happy is sing. And that was it. My path was set for life. I knew that this is what I wanted to do forever.
Wow.
Nice.
With Crystal, with all of these, you talk about these traumatic experiences that your community is going through, and you just wanted to make people happy. What influenced what you sang about? Was it there's this darkness, or was it I need to sing about light, right? Like, or was there a mix of both?
Definitely a mix of both. I sang the dark and the sad songs because they helped me understand what people were going through. Like sometimes when I would hear, my parents listened to a lot of Hank Williams, and particularly they listened to a lot of, Hank Williams did this whole series of songs, and he did like a persona called Luke the Drifter. And Luke the Drifter would tell these stories that were very hard luck, sad stories, and like people who are just trying to put food on the table. Like, we don't know if we're going to make it through this next year kind of thing, I listened to my parents struggle about money. And then I would hear songs about, about tragedies like that, within relationships. And that helped me understand what was going on to the grown-ups around me, like aunts, uncles, cousins. And then I also would sing songs of light because they gave me hope. And so I hoped that they would give other people hope if I sang those songs. So, life is both dark and light. So I think it's important to embrace both sides. And, that balance helps us, when we dig into that. Like, something I always say is like with depression, it's okay to give into it sometimes, curl up in a little ball, cry it out, eat some ice cream, watch some sad movies, and just cry some more, then get back up again. It's okay to get down, and when we get down in the dark, we just find our way back to the light.
That's great. That's nice. I think is if I'm not mistaken from my research, your brother is a traditional keeper and counselor.
He's a healer. He's a medicine.
Healer.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
A healer. Yeah. And I know, like, some of your lyrics focus on mental health, and I know you're a big, big supporter, not supporter, supporter's not the right word. Educating people about missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls and TS, Two-Spirit. So, can you talk a bit about that? And I know that's a whole bunch of stuff wrapped up into one, but I'd love to, if you just sort of talk about, mental health issues and again, missing.
Yeah, for sure. It's, for me, ever since I was a little kid, I knew, like I said, it was all about cheap therapy. Music is medicine, music heals. That's my common message, is music heals. And it really extends from when I was a little kid and I first received my spirit name, and which is Semakwe, which translates to tobacco woman. And in our culture, tobacco is a sacred medicine. And so when I was given that name, I was told that I carry medicine and that I will help heal people. Not like going to cure cancer or, heart problems or something like that, but you'll heal people who are hurting internally, mentally, spiritually. And I was told not just my people, but all people. And so that's why it's always been important for me, my personal journey, to record mainstream music, because I feel like I will be able to reach the masses more. But I've also found a way to incorporate our stories, because I wouldn't be a true artist if I wasn't telling the stories that are true to me. It doesn't make sense for me to tell other people's stories, So I try to share the stories that I grew up with, issues that I grew up with. It could be from depression and suicide to, as you said, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and as well as the Two-Spirit. And so it's just about raising awareness, and my mom always raised me to understand that, because there wasn't a lot of Indigenous representation in media, whether it's music or movies or TV, she always would remind me, you are one of the first breaking through. And that's a big responsibility, and that I needed to respect that and embrace that responsibility. She would always say, it doesn't mean, it doesn't have to be a burden. They could be quite the blessing if you try to raise awareness about issues that people out in the world don't know that we're dealing with, and help our people feel represented in that mainstream light, so so those were things, and then I also find ways to do it in production wise, and a lot of my music, whether people realize it or not, sometimes we put hand drums in the track, or the bigger powwow drum hidden in the track. We lace it in there. I've even had a jingle dress dancer come into the studio and dance, and us record the sounds that the jingles make, because the jingle dress is a medicine dress. It's a healing dress. And so I feel like when I put those in the track, that's what we're doing. It just adds to what I'm trying to do is, music heals.
Nice.
That's great. That's great. It's interesting. Just a very personal thing to share, not personal thing to share, but you talk about Two-Spirit, and I have to say, and again, this is giving props to Manitoulin, to the island where we are now. I am telling you, when I was in a teenager in the 80s, and I was into new wave, and I had the boots and the hair, big hair and everything else, and we'd go to a dance, I was not called the nicest of names by a lot of the locals out of like Mindamoya, and again, nothing against Mindamoya, but my parents live there. I'm going to be there this weekend. But what I will say is what I love to see about, again, right before COVID, so 2019, was how the island and Little Current and the communities have embraced Pride. I don't know if you've been up for Pride at all during the time, but I got goosebumps, because again, it's night and day compared to what I experienced as a kid.
Absolutely. I definitely, I haven't been there for it, but I've heard about it, and I think it's wonderful. It's great, because there's lots of kids, like you said, who are growing up in these rural areas, and it's even more difficult, to feel like you fit in when you're in a rural area, when you're growing up like that. You feel like you can't talk about it. You can't find anybody to relate to. So there's so many of us who are misfits in different ways, and we find each other, but it's much more difficult in the rural areas. Yeah. And so it is great to see the change and to see that support. The more everybody talks about it, the more awareness there is, and the more it makes it easier for kids to come out and talk about it and feel comfortable and confident, and as it should be.
Crystal, I want to get to some of your earlier influences that led you first to take the path of country music. But before I get there, you said earlier that your family knows good music. There's only good music and bad music. I'm really curious. Is it bad music? Is there a certain style of music that's bad? Or is it like, yeah, that person just can't hold a tune bad?
Or is it just Karim playing the acoustic guitar when he's going to do it in bed?
Oh, no, it's just, when I say bad music, I guess I would say, I don't know. My family, they love great singers.
Mm-hmm.
They love great singers. I'm talking about singers before tuners, singers who were stylists, who had range, who had texture, who could do different things with their voices, and that varies, and then sometimes it came down to some voices who were storytellers, people who were just amazing songwriters who could really convey the feelings that they were singing. Those were greats, and then they just didn't like empty music, like shallow or I don't know, I guess contrived music. They didn't go for that. Like music that was written for the purpose of trying to be a hit. They love album cuts. They were the people who listened to album cuts and over, and my brothers would be like, you have to listen to this song, even though this is the hit song. This song here is the best song, like that kind of stuff. And I had brothers who were really passionate about that. And my mom, there's certain singers would come on the radio. She'd be like, oh, can't stand that. She has that little wimpy poo voice, And, my mom wanted to hear great singers and strong singers and strong artists, whether they were female or male. people who fought for what they believed in and sang about what they believed in, and so yeah, that's what it was for us, good as far as good and bad music.
What was there you talked about Loretta Lynn, your mom really loving her. Who was it for you?
It was definitely Loretta Lynn in the beginning.
Okay.
Those were, my mom listened to her the most, and my mom was my best friend, is my best friend. And so I just always wanted to like what she liked and do what she did and be just like her in every way. And so I wanted to sing just like Loretta, and my tone had started to become very much like Loretta's, and the way she would write her songs, I was very inspired by that. And we watched the Coal Miner's Daughter movie like a million times by the time I was like a teenager, and we would sit there and just learn and absorb, and the way watching her stubbornly learn to play the guitar and learn how to write songs, and I was like, okay, this is what I have to do, and borrowing my dad's guitar, and then finally he bought me my own guitar, and just sitting there, and and it helped that I grew up out in the sticks. I didn't live in the main village. So I couldn't go out and run around with the other kids because there was no other kids. The nearest kid was like, a few kilometers away. And so I would just sit in the basement and sing along and play music. And so it was Loretta Lynn and Patsy Cline in the beginning. And I was really drawn to the stories, and everything they were singing about. I was watching my mom go through that, and I saw how important that was to feel represented. My mom being, she grew up a lot like Loretta. She went from being somebody's daughter to being somebody's wife to being somebody's mother. And, she didn't really have a time in between for herself. So it was a lot. So in a way, she lived through Loretta's dreams, watching her chase her dreams despite having all these children. And it inspired my mom, and I think that's a big reason about why my mom went back to school, because my mom didn't finish school. So she went back and she got her high school diploma, and then she went to college and got her degree, and, started working as a teacher, working the school system with special needs children. And all of that, I think, was because of, watching somebody like Loretta, claw their way out of their circumstances and where they grew up, and the things that hold them back. And so Loretta was a really big influence for me for a long time. And it was people were listening to new country, but I was like years behind that. I didn't start listening to new country till way later. So, but yeah, Loretta was a really big influence on me. So, getting to meet her and sing with her years later was a full circle moment that I got to share with my mom and my parents. And, when I sang on the Grand Ole Opry, Loretta was there, and she came out to see us and to meet my mom. And my mom shared stories about how, they both grew up the same way. Loretta grew up in the hills of Kentucky, and my mom grew up in the bushes of a First Nations reservation in Canada. But they had a lot of similarities, they both didn't have shoes in the summertime. They only got new shoes in the wintertime. They both grew up without electricity or plumbing, and they both grew up listening to the Grand Ole Opry on a radio. And it was that radio, listening to the Grand Ole Opry, that made the world feel smaller, and it made it feel like, hey, maybe someday I can get out there, and that inspired me to know. And then so when my mom shared that with Loretta, they got to hug, we hugged, and we all shared stories and laughed and joked, and it was amazing. And then after Loretta Lynn walked away, me and my mom hugged and cried, and it was just like, we did it, we made it to Loretta. And it was, if nothing else happened and only that happened, that would have been everything.
Absolutely.
That's amazing. You talk about the struggles your mom had and Loretta had. You've shared some of your challenges like earlier in your career as an Indigenous country artist. Can you talk a bit about that and some of the challenges and prejudices that you had to deal with?
Because for sure. I was in, when I moved to Nashville, well, growing up on the music scene, I started singing as soon as I could make noise. I was on stage at 6 years old and started getting paid to do it when I was 10 and started trying to make the circuits, but pretty early on, I hit a lot of walls and a lot of ceilings. And, and the common thing that we were always told, like my parents and me was, maybe take her to the Indigenous music night or the Indigenous music hour, or, she needs to be doing Indigenous music because that's who she is. So we felt like there was no room to grow because of that. And so my dad was a truck driver and we started making trips to Nashville when I was like 12 years old.
Wow.
And there was a much bigger world. Nobody said, when I went to sing in Nashville in the beginning, trying to sing at the honky tonks, nobody said, what is she or what's her nationality or she can't sing country music. She's an Indigenous person. Like the people didn't even know what I was. Like sometimes people thought I was Hawaiian. Some people thought I was Brazilian. Some people thought I was, Mexican. So they didn't even know who I was. They were just, and I was definitely the only brown person on Broadway at that time, trying to, break through. But when I did started to, when I first moved to Nashville, I was 16 years old. And I was too naive to be scared, because I didn't hit those walls and those ceilings. So I had all this confidence and I was just so excited to be there. Like, I'm in Nashville. I'm here. I did it. I moved here. So I would knock on doors I had no right to knock on, record labels, publishers, management offices, agencies, booking agents. And, most of the time people would turn me away and be like, hey, you got to get your manager to book an appointment and that sort of thing. But sometimes I would get lucky. And one of the times I got lucky was at a really big record label. And I could see there was this guy walking in and he was jiggling his keys to go to the back where the offices are. And I'm trying to talk my way into meeting somebody with the receptionist. And she's, giving me the old, we don't take unsolicited visitors. You can't just walk in here. And then the guy was like, hey, I got a couple minutes. Come on in and sing a couple songs for me. And I was like, okay. And he introduced himself and I knew who he was. He was a very, very famous producer and had produced some of my most favorite albums from some of my favorite singers who inspired me to move to Nashville. Wow. And he was also at that time executive within a record label. And then, so I sat down and I was very nervous, but I was excited to prove to him, and I knew I wasn't ready, but I just wanted to know if I was wasting my time or not. Like, am I on the right track? And that's what I did a lot of time. I was looking for critique, give me advice. What can I do to be ready? And so I sang the couple songs and afterwards he said, well, he was quiet for a couple minutes. Then he finally spoke and he said, your voice is amazing. Like, it's huge. He's like, but I just wouldn't know what to do with you. A Native American within country music. I'm not sure if that makes sense. I wouldn't, I don't know if country music fans are ready for that and I wouldn't even know how to market you, where to begin. And then I said, oh, okay. And I didn't really know what to say. And I wanted to cry. I was 17 years old and I was trying to be a big girl, real mature, because, it's the music business. There's no crying in baseball. And so I tried to be a big girl and said, oh, okay, thank you for your time. And I walked out and I left and I just kind of went into autopilot. I'd go to work, do everything I'm supposed to, and next day start all over. And then a couple weeks later, I realized what was bothering me. I realized that I couldn't work with what he gave me. Like if he said I was out of tune, I could go get voice lessons. If he didn't like my hair, I could get a new hairdo, but there was nothing I could do about the color of my skin. And nor did I want to. I was happy with who I was. So I didn't see the problem. But the way he put it, it was like, oh, okay, so this is just never going to happen. It's not a possibility. So I should just probably quit then. So and that's what I did. A few weeks later, I packed up and I went back home to my reserve. And I just basically slipped into a deep depression. I started hanging out with people I wouldn't normally hang out with and started, partying and drinking a lot and, kind of spiraled backwards really fast. And I was always a go-getter. I was very ambitious. So nobody had ever seen me like this before. And people within my community and my family were always telling me, go try again, get back out there. If I had what you had, I would be gone. And I would try to tell them, you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what it's like. And I would just quit. I kept telling people, I don't sing anymore. I'm not a singer. I'm going to school and I'm going to be a teacher. And then, but people just wouldn't give up on me. People kept pulling me aside and telling me, you got to go back. You got to go back. And no matter what I did, I kept ending up back on a stage, back in front of a microphone, back in front of a guitar. And it just, and then I just got tired of living the way I was living. And then I just decided that I was going to go back again. And this time I was going to go back because I just love to sing, because that's who I am. And I'm not going back for a record deal. I'm not going back to become a big famous star. I'm going back because that's where I make sense. Because back home, there's nowhere to sing. And when I can't sing, I get into trouble. and that's what I did. And I went back to Nashville and I said, F that guy. And I just kept trying. And I went and sang at the clubs of Nashville on Broadway. I got a full-time gig and I started playing, 3 to 4 shifts a day, 6 days a week. I was there from 10 a.m. to 2 a.m., living out of a tip jug. That's how I paid my bills. And I realized that, country music fans were ready for me because people were coming into that club and buying my CDs and my tip jug was overflowing. And I was just like, and that's what built up the buzz that built up. And next thing you know, I had publishers, managers, producers, and labels courting me and a bidding war going on. And, and it just happened like that. And it just, and that was one of the things I faced with being one of the first Indigenous artists to really push my way into country music.
Were you singing covers? Did you have your own material? What was happening?
When I played for that guy, I played a cover,
sure,
which was my version of Cheating Heart by Hank Williams, which ended up, funny enough, that song ended up on my very first debut album, Dawn of a New Day, that I did with RCA Records, because I never gave up on that song. It was like, he didn't like it, he didn't get it, but I'm going to keep doing this song till somebody gets it. And eventually people got it. And RCA, that was actually, when I did my showcase for RCA Records, that was the song. They were like, you're recording that and you're putting this on your first album. So it's kind of funny, the song I auditioned with that, that guy said no to is the one that got me all my success. And, but I did that. And I also did an original. But when I played on Broadway for tips, I mostly did covers because that's what keeps people in the seats. Yeah. That's what keeps people drinking. And that's what keeps that tip jug full.
Fair enough.
And that's what it comes down to. If you want to play Broadway, the owners of those bars, they don't care if you can sing. They just want to know if you can sell beer for them. And that's it. And I was a really good, bad influence back in the day when I was a kid. And that ended up coming in handy when I started singing in honky tonks.
That's awesome. What a great story. Have you, by the way, Crystal, have you bumped into that guy? You must have. He must know who you are and go, damn it. But have you, did you bump into him at award shows?
I did. When I signed with RCA Records, they were looking for my producer. And so they would send down producers to watch me play at Tootsie so they can listen to me. And then after I would play, I would visit with them to see if we click or not. And he was one of the producers that they sent down. But the funny, he didn't remember me. He kind of did, but he didn't. He kept saying, did we meet somewhere before? Do I know you from somewhere? And he kept saying that. And I was like, we met a long time ago. It's okay, you don't remember. I remember though. But he was very nice and he wanted to produce me and he was excited. He's like, I got so many ideas and I'm the producer for you. This is the one, and then it just felt really good to say, I think at this time I'm going to go with another route, but thanks so much. I'm a big fan of your work, but I just feel like, you're not the one for me. And that was it. And I never told him why. And I've never said his name because I don't feel like it's necessary. It's not going to do anything, No. he's still super successful. And I know what it came down to. He was scared. He wasn't necessarily, he was just scared. He would have been the first, and that was a scary dice to roll. And in the music business, when you sign an artist to a record deal, they're spending $1 million on you, and that's a lot of money to gamble on some dice, and to gamble on an artist. And he was just afraid, because if it didn't work out, if the country music fan base wasn't ready for me because I was Indigenous, then he would have lost his job and his credibility. And, and not everybody in the music, there's some people out there who are part of this business who are really brave and bold and fearless. And he just wasn't one of them. He's always done what is safe, but it always works. And that's why he's so successful.
So, Crystal, you become a successful country star. Like star. And then you wake up one day and say, I think I want to go and do this blues stuff. It was amazing. It was amazing. I was so blessed. Everything that happened was beyond my wildest dreams. Like for me, I just wanted to meet Loretta Lynn, and sing for a living. Sing for a living, Fair. And then, we ended up touring all over. We played every major music festival in Canada and America. I played the Grand Ole Opry several times. And, we got my album debuted on the Billboard charts. And it was amazing. I couldn't really go anywhere at that time in Canada without being recognized. And it was incredible, but it was also really intense, because I was promoting an album, not just in Canada, but America as well. Like in Canada at that time, if you wanted a hit record, you only really needed to visit like 8 key stations, and then you would be able to get a hit. In America, at the minimum, you needed to visit at least 275 radio stations. What? Just with the hopes that maybe they might play you. And that's not even a guarantee. So that was the difference. So I would go up to Canada and with Sony Canada, and we would visit the 8 radio stations and a few TV stations. Then I go to America, and I was like, in one day we would like hit up 4 states and hit up all these radio stations. And it was so intense, and like early mornings, like getting up at 4 a.m. and going to bed at like 2 a.m. because we're schmoozing some radio programmer, taking him out to dinner and spending $1,000 on his dinner and his wine and his champagne and, and that sort of thing. And it was really intense. And what I say about that time in my life was it was a beautiful blur. But that's what it was a blur, and it got to the point where I wasn't seeing my family anymore. My parents, my siblings, my nieces and nephews, my one nephew was 5 years old and he didn't know who I was. He knew I was Crystal Shawanda, but he never actually spent time with me because that's how busy my schedule was. And I just got to a point where I just didn't like the way it was feeling. I was losing control of my life. There was no quality of life. Yes, my career was booming, but everything else was lacking, and I was depressed. I was lonely. I was in this bubble just floating around, and every once in a while the bubble would pop and I would sing, and then I'm back in the bubble again. And it was a very bizarre thing, and then I just didn't like the songs I was singing. Like when we were recording my 3rd country album, I was sitting there listening back to all the songs we recorded, and I realized I didn't like any of them. Oh, wow. But these were the kind of songs that we thought might keep me on the radio. And, because country music at that time was starting to go into more of a real pop direction, with loops and stuff like that. And so that's what we were starting to do. And I just didn't like the way that felt. I didn't like the idea of recording and singing songs just because it might get me on the radio. There was no message in any of the songs. There was nothing that I connected to personally. And, but we thought they would be hits, and I just didn't like the way that felt. So I unplugged, I abandoned that 3rd country album. And then I just took a couple months off to just live. And then one day I was watching the news and seeing all these horrible headlines all over the world. Like, no matter who you are, what your background is, everybody's going through something,
and there was all this stuff going on that I had no idea was going on. And then I just picked up my guitar and I just started writing. And for once, I wasn't trying to write a hit song. You know, I was just writing for my own therapy. Mm-hmm. I took it back to how I started songwriting. I was trying to understand the world around me. And so I sat there, and the song was called The Whole World's Got the Blues. And my husband walked in and he's like, "What is that you're writing?" I'm like, "I don't know, but I like it." And he sat down and we wrote it together. And that was the beginning for me. I was like, what do we do with this song? This is such an important message and it needs to get out there. But I knew country music was never going to look at that song or let it through the doors. And so around that time, you know, there was artistic differences with the label I was with. And so I decided to go out on my own. And I started my own record label called New Sun Records. And, you know, and I told my husband, it's like, this is why we're doing this, is because we want to remember who we are again, musically, artistically, creatively, personally, intimately, you know, and the only way we can do that is just take a chance, you know. And so because we owned our own record label, we could do whatever we wanted. So we did a blues album, and that was what led me to the blues. And that was the beginning of it all. And that was why I left country music. And, you know, some of my country music fans took it very personal. And I tried my best to help them understand. But some people were just really mad, you know, like some people send me messages and say, "Hey, just so you know, now that you don't do country music, I'm not coming to your shows anymore and buying your music anymore." And I was like, okay, thanks for telling me. Wow. You know, like at the end of the day, I'm just like everybody else. I'm just trying to figure out who I am, where I make sense, where I belong, where I fit in before I run out of time, you know. And that's all I've been trying to do. And I just feel like within the blues is like letting a bird out of a cage. Like I can just be myself. I don't have to, because before when I was singing country music, I had to restrain my voice, you know, and my producer was always telling me, don't sing like that, you know, don't pinch, you know, don't hit those high notes too much, because country music these days likes everything linear, you know, no trills, you know, don't get too fancy. We don't want to scare people off. And but with the blues, I can just let it fly. Yeah. I literally don't even have to think about it. I can just sing what I want and everybody's like, that's cool. And I'm like, I found my place, you know, I found where I fit in.
Nice. That's awesome. And so fast forward to last year's Junos, you win Blues Album of the Year. Is that 2021, right? Yeah, 2021.
It was 2020, eh?
Was it 2020?
Oh, yes, sorry, 2020. Sorry. Yes. Okay. It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to say, watching that, your daughter's reaction, that was the sweetest acceptance, if you will, that I've ever seen. And again, the pandemic and virtual and everything just made it the moment that it was.
Thank you. It was amazing. You know, when we were nominated, we were so thrilled, you know, because this was our fifth, was it our fifth blues album? Yeah, it was our fifth blues album. So it took us a long time to earn that Juno nomination for blues album. So we were just, you know, thrilled about that. And I honestly didn't think I was going to win, because there were some amazing albums up that year. People that artists that I truly respect and admire. You know, I thought for sure it was going to go to Angel or Samantha. Any one of them, honestly. I just didn't think it was me. And before the awards, everybody was messaging each other and everybody agreed. They said, let's all dress up our top half, you know, like just kind of jokingly, like, let's still get in the spirit of it all. And I was like, yeah, okay. And, you know, I was rushing around with my daughter. It was National Pizza and Donut Day that day. So I was like sending my husband out for donuts and pizza. And I'm more concerned about my daughter, you know. And then I did my hair and makeup. Well, I just did my makeup. I just brushed my hair. And then I had my Cher t-shirt on. And my husband was like, the show was starting. I'm like, oh, I'll just leave it. Like they're going to see me for 2 seconds when they mention my nomination. And that's it. I'm not going to win. So nobody will even notice what I'm wearing. And then I saw when William Prince was nominated, he had his son sitting in the little window with him, right? So I was like, oh, we should do that too. That's so cute. Joshua, come sit with me. And then so she came and sat with me, and then they mentioned the nominations. We waved, and then I just kind of started like, oh, okay, well, anyways, we're done with this now. And then they said I won, and my husband was like, I think you just won. And I'm like, what? And then my daughter's like, oh, you definitely won. And she was so excited. She was hugging my head. And then I got so confused about what I was supposed to do, because they said, if you win, after you win, go to the media room. But it just didn't occur to me that they meant, you got to give your acceptance speech first and then go to the media room. But me, I was just like, oh, I won. I got to go to the media room. So I pressed the button, went to the media room. Then they're like, no, you got to accept your award. I'm like, what? And I'm like, how do I get back? And then I got back and I'm like, is it too late? Thanks, everyone. And that was that, and CBC ended up calling it the Juno Award for the cutest moment of the night was me and my daughter. And I was thrilled about that. I loved it, because I just adore her. And I bring her with me everywhere I go. I don't leave home without her. If she can't be a part of it, then I can't be a part of it. So she's usually always backstage, right where I could see her. And she grew up in the studio on the stage. So it was really special to have her. And although we were all going through all this frustrating and depressing and, stuff through the pandemic, having that little human moment was really special. And for me, that would have never happened if we had attended the awards like normal. We would have been sitting at the table and I would have went up and accepted it. And she would have been sitting there at the table. But this way she was able to be a part of it. So it was pretty special.
That's great.
Congrats, Crystal,
Thank you
on that. And congrats as well. We're 45 minutes and we haven't even spoken about your latest release, which is Midnight Blues. Which came out a few months ago, earlier this fall. Tell us about this album and the inspiration for some of the songs that made it on the album.
For sure, this album, we actually recorded this throughout the whole pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we won that Juno Award, we went right back to writing and went back in the studio. Thankfully, we have a studio right in our home in Nashville. So we just kept working. We stayed in our bubble and we worked and we wrote and recorded and sent ideas to the label in Canada. And we went back and forth and just created it. And, so some of the albums kind of reflect kind of what we were going through, but I don't get too specific about it, like Midnight Blues, I call the album that because something I kept seeing during the pandemic is sometimes I wouldn't be able to sleep, and so you get up in the middle of the night, you're worried because you don't even know what's going on in the world. Like, is this a conspiracy? Is this real? Is this the end of the world? What's happening? And so you get up at 2 a.m. and go to Facebook and you start scrolling and there's a whole bunch of other people on Facebook who are like, how am I going to pay my bills? Or, me and my partner realized we're not right for each other through this pandemic. And he moved out and now I'm here alone. And, there was all this stuff. But it seems like no matter what gets us down, it always hits us the most in the middle of the night. And so we all get those midnight blues and, we all get the blues. And that was the point in calling the album that. And then there's songs like Take a Little Walk with the Moon is a song that me and my husband, who's my guitar player and producer, we actually wrote this song with our daughter, Jaja. Who's the little girl in the acceptance speech co-wrote that song with us. Because it was kind of something we did during the pandemic when we would get, it wasn't safe to go out during the day. There's too many people. We didn't know what was going on. Still so much uncertainty. So we would go for night walks because there's less people out. So we would, as soon as the sun was setting, we'd go for our night walks into neighborhoods that we love to go to. And so one night we were going out and our daughter said, come on, mommy and daddy, let's go take a little walk with the moon. And we were like, oh, that would make a great song. And we just started writing it while we were walking. And by the time we were done our walk, we pretty much finished the idea of the song and got home and Dwayne picked up his guitar and started, with the melody. And it just happened so quickly. So that song really reflects what we went through as a family. We went through some, real bonding and we were in our own little world, but we were okay. We were together. We were safe. We had food. We had a roof over our head. And we just kind of embrace the moment, and that's what I kept trying to encourage people to do. Just embrace the moment. Let's not fight it because we're just going to frustrate ourselves, And so there's a song on the album called Hold Me. And that's really about let's get back to who we are. Let's remember, just hold me. Let's just remember who we are. We get stuck in this rat race of trying to pay bills and, reach goals in our careers that we forget what it's all about, and who it's for. It's for each other, our families, our partners. And so, yes. And then there's feel good songs like How Bad Do You Want It, which is a song we wrote just as we were coming out of the pandemic last year, when we were just starting to play shows again. And we were just like, we were rolling the dice, and people were like, are you sure you want to get out and play shows? And we're like, yes, we do. And, it's our risk, and we were still wearing masks because we didn't want to get sick. But at the same time, we needed to start living again. And as musicians, that's our income. So we kind of had to.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then there's fun songs called like Rum Shaker that just is just about getting people to get out and dance. And because we were thinking about, when we get back to live music, what can't we wait for? And that was the thing we couldn't wait for the most, was seeing people at our shows dancing. So it's a little bit of everything. It's really a celebration of life.
Awesome.
That's great.
Crystal, let's talk about lost venues. And maybe there's one in Nashville that you can talk about, because you've been there for a while now. But is there a place that no longer exists that you have maybe fond memories of? Maybe you have a horror story or a funny story. Wonder if you could share one of your lost venues with us.
Lost venues. Oh my goodness. There's so many, unfortunately, that don't exist anymore, and that I could go on and on about, of good memories and bad memories. But one of them, for me, when I first moved to Nashville, that I used to go to a lot, was a place called the Broken Spoke Saloon. And it had two parts to it. The front part was like a bar, and they had pool tables and a dance floor. And the band there always did like, top country songs, like hit country songs, cover songs. And then the back of the place was the Songwriters Cafe. And so that's where they would have songs in the round, songwriters come in. And you just never knew who you were going to hear. Like, I would go there as many nights as I possibly could. And then I would get up to sing at the end of the night, because that's where only the newbies always had to sing at the end of the night, when mostly everybody's gone, but we would go early to listen to the masters, so we could learn how to become better songwriters, hopefully meet a songwriter that we could write with, network. And, I have great memories and I have bad memories, but what's really cool about it is that there was a lot of other Canadians hanging out there at the time too, like Vicky Banks, who's an amazing songwriter from Canada, from the Muskoka area. She's had a few different hits, and she's been living in Nashville since back then as well. And I remember somebody saying, she's from Canada. I'm like, what? That's so cool. And then she was one of my favorite writers and one of my favorite voices. And I used to just sit there and listen to her songs and think, oh, I hope someday I can, record one of her songs, which I eventually did on my first Dawn of a New Day album. One of my songs was co-written with her. So that was a dream come true for me, watching her, because she was on her way at that time. She was already building a buzz up. She had a publishing deal. And then one time they had a Canadian night there, and Carolyn Dawn Johnson was brought in for the Canadian night. And this was just after she hit big. Her first hit was just starting to climb the charts. And she came there and I got to meet her. So that was inspiring for me as well. And, and also I heard the song A Little Past Little Rock by Leanne Womack. I remember hearing the guy who wrote it singing it on the stage and saying, hey, great news, everybody. I just found out today that this song is going to get cut by Leanne Womack. And then a few months later, hearing it on the radio. And I was like, I was there, I heard it before it was like famous and cut. And, those kind of experiences. Who else? The Wilkinsons. I remember they came in for a songwriters night when they were just starting to get attention and take off. And so I have a lot of really cool memories, and then I also figured out through that club that, because when you go to Nashville, you either go for the honky tonks and, do that kind of style, or you go to songwriters nights and do the quiet singer-songwriter thing. Well, through the process, I found out that maybe I wasn't the quiet singer-songwriter type. I thought I was, but I found out I wasn't, because I started to get restless. I was getting frustrated because they would always put me on last. and nobody was ever there when it was time for me to sing. And then so one night I saw that they were having a singing contest at the bar in the front where they play the cover songs. And the prize was like $500. And I was like so broke, no money for gas. I had like a can of Chef Boyardee in my cupboard and some ramen noodles. And so I decided that I'm going to go enter that contest while I'm waiting to sing here. So I go enter the contest. I ended up winning. I came back and I'm like, is it time for me to sing yet? And the lady running the night was like, Crystal, people here respect each other. We all sit and listen to each other. And that's what it's all about. And I was like, really? Because nobody ever sits and listens to me. By the time I get up, everybody's gone. So where's that mutual respect? And then as she says, well, if you're going to be like that, then maybe you should go back to those kind of bars with the honky tonks and the live bands and the drunk people. And I said, I picked up my guitar and I said, you know what? I think I will, because I have a lot more fun over there. Bye.
What?
And that was it. And that was the goodbye to my singer-songwriter, quiet style. And that's when I made my way down to Broadway and started singing for tips out of a tip jug and, getting people going and making them, drink a lot more than they originally planned to. And it was a lot of fun. I had so much fun. People would come down to those honky tonks and, and they're all trying to be prim and proper. And by the time I was done with them, they were dancing on tables.
That's awesome.
So that's my memories about the Broken Spoke Saloon, which just recently we drove by it. It sat empty for years and now it's completely gone. It's now a parking lot. And that's the end of the Broken Spoke Saloon.
They paved paradise and put up a parking lot.
They really did. And there's nothing there. It's just a parking lot. It's like, okay.
Wow. Speaking of to me, an iconic musician, I know with the passing of Ron Hawkins, the earlier this year, you shared that, if I'm not mistaken, again, bringing it back to the Manitoulin, that the first time you sang with him was in Kagawon?
Yes, it was. They had, I can't even remember what it was. It was some big event. It was like a big music. It was like the first time they ever had it, and they were going to have it every year, but they didn't. But it was fantastic. I remember they had it was so much fun. They had live music. They had these boats that were taking people for rides on those, like the tubes and the water skiing. Mm-hmm. And there was tug of war going on and people were drinking and dancing. It was so much fun. And I got to go there. My parents took me there and somebody hired me to sing. But then when I got there, I got to meet Ronnie Hawkins and his band, and I was invited to sing with them. So I was 11 years old when I got up to sing with them. And it was just so funny because you're right. If people only knew, Kagawon is way in the backwoods of Manitoulin. And just the other, couple months ago, we were driving by there. And I was like, I still can't believe Ronnie Hawkins came all the way out here. And then I sang with him again later. A mutual friend of ours named Charlie Bear. He was used to help me out a lot when I was a kid. He would hire me to sing and pay me more than I deserved. And he would always hire Ronnie Hawkins too. So we would always be his entertainment for all his private parties. So yeah, Ronnie was a big influence, and knowing everywhere that Ronnie had been and everything he had accomplished, how he had influenced so many other people, that gave me a lot of inspiration and hope that, I could do that too. I could go out in the world and I could travel and play music, and the world is not as big as we think it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've got 1 minute left. I have one quick question before we sign off. What are you listening to lately that people should be checking out?
What am I listening to lately? Oh my goodness. Oh, there's so many. I love Yola. Yola is one of my favorite singers right now. I just think she's exquisite. Brittany Howard, I love her. Brandi Carlile. There's so many out there. Joanne Shaw Taylor, Joe Bonamassa. So many out there. Those are just a few that just off the Samantha Fish. I love Samantha Fish. Southern Avenue, fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you.
That's a lot of great music.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of great music.
So I'm wondering, Crystal, with you and William Prince being buddies, have you told him, is he going to make the move to the blues?
I don't know. I think William's doing great, just great with what he's doing. That's what's so cool about William is he knows exactly who he is, and he's not afraid to be who he is. And I think that's what so many of us love about him. It's very refreshing, and he's always just been super cool. He's one of my favorite humans and artists, because a lot of time, he always, every time I see him, he always reminds me of how I inspired him and how he used to walk on TV. And, and then when we sang on the Canada Day show, he's like, I remember him telling me that it's amazing. I watched you on TV and now I'm going to be on TV singing beside you. And, and there's nobody's ever, it's very rare that singers will let their guard down and confess to you what you mean to them. So I always appreciate William telling me that, because when he told me that was at a time in my career when I wasn't sure if I was going to make it, like I was like, is this it? Am I winding down? And then after he shared that story with me, and Brett Kissel shared the exact same story with me.
Wow.
I remember thinking, wow, thank you. I really needed that right now in my life. Like, you guys have no idea how much I needed that, it really encouraged me and it helped me hold on for all this other awesome stuff that's been happening since then. So, I always try to do the same for other artists. Hey, you inspired me, because we never know what that could mean to them and how much it could change their path.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Crystal. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Crystal, this has been an amazing chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for fitting me in.
I literally have dozens of questions that I haven't even got to. So
part two.
We'll have to do it again then.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I would love that.
We'll all meet up on the Manitoulin. I mean, he's come up to my place numerous times. We'll time it when you're up there. We'll come up there and we'll film the next part 2 from the island.
That would be so awesome. And thank you again for being so understanding when I missed the thing. I was just sick, and I was just out of it. I just dropped so many balls that week.
It's all good.
No worries.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Crystal, thank you again. Our guest has been Crystal Shawanda. Her latest, Midnight Blues, is out now. You can find that album as well as her music, tour dates at crystalshawanda.co. Go check it out. This has been awesome. Thank you so much, Crystal.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.